A struggle to shape the future of Brexit is looming in Westminster. Who should be in control of the process? The government or parliamentarians? Theresa May's failed to get backing for her deal. Tomorrow she'll present a plan B and try again. But senior backbench MPs are offering up their alternatives, with amendments to stop a no-deal Brexit or even to allow the Commons to delay the withdrawal process. And those backbenchers are now being accused of hijacking Brexit.
I think that has consequences that go way beyond Brexit, and we'd be very wise not to throw away all our well-worn conventions and traditions in this country just over the Brexit issue.
It's a strange suggestion that MPs doing their job is somehow dangerous. It's what we're elected for.
But there are many people who voted for Brexit and wanted a certain outcome who are now very angry at the way MPs are behaving.
Well, what we're trying to do is to find a way of resolving this. You need legislation to force the government to listen, because the Prime Minister is not listening.
So how will Theresa May turn her plan around? The most controversial aspect of her proposal is the backstop on the Irish border. It could leave Northern Ireland aligned to many EU rules. The Sunday Times claims she's hoping to offer Ireland a bilateral deal to try and resolve it. Would that be enough to get her own Tory MPs behind it?
My fear is that Theresa's plan B is actually no deal, which would be the very worst outcome. And that is, the reason I say that is because it's the only thing that she's kept on the table. She says she won't move on the customs union, she won't move on the single market, she won't move on a second referendum, a people's vote. So what's left?
We do have to make sure we prepare for leaving potentially on a WTO basis, because we have to be able to demonstrate that we can walk away if necessary, but that would only be temporary, and I believe that the end result will be a Canada-style free trade agreement between the UK and the EU.
Unless Parliament intervenes, the UK will be leaving the EU with no deal. There have been dire warnings of what that could mean: delays on borders, food shortages and major disruption to trade. The International Trade Secretary previously claimed we would have up to 40 trade deals ready for 1 second after midnight on Brexit Day.
Dr. Fox, do we have any trade deals that are ready to go on the 29th of March?
We signed one on Friday. If anyone had been paying attention, we're signing another one next week. We'll be signing another one in a couple of weeks, and we've got a number that are well in their development.
You previously said that a trade deal with the EU would be the easiest in history. Do you still believe that?
Well, we haven't started a trade deal with the EU, have we? That comes after we've left the European Union.
But the exit negotiation hasn't been easy.
Well, the exit negotiation is not a trade agreement, so you'd have to talk about the same thing. A trade agreement is what happens after we leave the EU. We're not allowed to negotiate that till we've actually got the withdrawal process. We're in the withdrawal process, which was always going to be difficult because it's about money and it's about political power.
And the fight for political power is at the heart of the struggle in Westminster, as today's front pages make clear.
So what exactly would happen under the Dominic Grieve amendment? Well, it would allow rebels to take control of parliamentary business if a motion for debate is backed by at least 300 MPs, just 46% of the total. And those 300 MPs would have to include 10 Tories, plus representatives from at least 4 other parties. Then it would be the first item of business the next day in the Commons. Well, earlier, Dominic Grieve told me he would wait to see what the Prime Minister had to say tomorrow in her Plan B before tabling his amendment. So I asked him what he's hoping to achieve.
We have an opportunity to ensure that there is a proper debate in Parliament about the challenges that Brexit poses, and an opportunity, if we want to take it, for Parliament to be able to pass resolutions indicating to the government its preferred course of action and what it thinks the government should be doing in the current crisis.
One of the proposals that has been floating around over the weekend would see backbench MPs basically riding roughshod over the government, the executive. What do you think gives MPs the right to do that?
I don't think it's a question of riding roughshod over the executive at all. I mean, Parliament, the executive can't function without Parliament's approval. The government has a problem in that its key policy has been rejected by a very substantial majority of members of the House of Commons, and the government should now be engaging in an open dialogue with the House of Commons to find a way forward.
It's been suggested that what you're doing is overturning a Westminster system of majorities that has gone on for centuries. Are you sure that what you're doing is entirely constitutional?
I'm absolutely 100% certain it is, and I am not trying to overturn the principle that decisions are taken by a majority of the House of Commons. If the House of Commons votes by a majority to provide a mechanism by which 300 MPs signing a document gives them precedence for debating a motion in Parliament, which is then decided by a majority, it is absolutely in keeping with our constitutional practices. Indeed, we're doing it in different ways all the time at the moment. It's not backbench MPs who are able to express that opinion.
The Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, said that you're trying to hijack Brexit. You're trying to steal the vote from people. Are you yourself a hijacker, a thief?
No, I'm not. What I am concerned about is that we should achieve a Brexit that people want.
But achieve a Brexit, not thwart a Brexit.
At the moment, we are being told that a Brexit of a particular kind has to be forced upon us by the government because there is no alternative, and I don't accept that.
Isn't there a danger that with this amendment you're going to bring forward, that you're going to push more Brexiteers into backing Theresa May's deal, which you don't want, you say it satisfies no one, or collapsing the government entirely?
Well, I have no desire to collapse the government. The government is at risk of collapse. And when I first suggested this mechanism of consulting the House last summer, I indicated that I was doing it precisely so that we could avoid a government collapse. As for what Brexiteers may or may not do as a result of this amendment, that's a matter for them. I think I've got to a stage of this debate where my interest is not in gaming outcomes, but trying to do what I think is right. And that's why I'm considering this option.
When did you decide to become a sort of reluctant revolutionary?
Well, I think I'm a very reluctant revolutionary as a previous law officer. What has become clear to me as the months have gone by is that, firstly, post-referendum, I did my very best to see the silver linings in the clouds of Brexit, and I found it impossible with the passing months to do so because it seemed to me clearer to me that we were heading for a major national crisis at the end of this process. And I've tried consistently, I think the one thing that can be said of me is I've tried consistently to tell the government to involve the House of Commons in an open dialogue about the best way forward. And unfortunately, it's something that the government has consistently resisted. And one of the reasons the crisis has developed in the way it has is because I'm afraid the Prime Minister hasn't listened on this point. I'm very sorry to have to say it, but she hasn't. And if we could have avoided some of this, if there had been greater flexibility.
Dominic Grieve, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, in a moment, I'll speak to the Labour MP, Yvette Cooper. But first, joining me now from southwest London is the Children's Minister, Nadhim Zahawi. Mr Zahawi, Dominic Grieve there said that he's a very reluctant revolutionary, but he's been forced to act because the government's making such a mess of things.
Well, tomorrow the Prime Minister will come to Parliament and there will be a motion put down by the government that will be amendable because we need to find out what Parliament is in favour of. We know what Parliament is against. Parliament voted against the withdrawal agreement. We need to find out what Parliament actually is in favour of. And I would just remind all colleagues, whether it's Dominic, who I've got a lot of time for, as well as Yvette Cooper, is that in the referendum of 2016, we were all given an instruction by the British people to deliver to the best of our abilities Brexit. And I think if people feel, the perception is that we are somehow going to derail the government's ability to deliver Brexit, then I don't think they will forgive us. I think to send our government and a Prime Minister into a negotiation with their arms tied behind their back because we take off issues like a no deal, why would anyone want to give you a good deal if they think you can't walk away?
OK, let me put a question to you because it's supposed to be a dialogue. It's supposed to be a dialogue in Parliament as well. Theresa May has surely got to compromise, hasn't she? And as part of that, if she were to take no deal off the table, she might get more Labour MPs and some of her own side on board.
Well, look, Theresa May's doors are open. She's been talking to leading parliamentarians and
but if she's
businesses
not listening, though, is it?
To make sure she... Well, no, I don't disagree. I don't agree with you. You can't go into... This is an ongoing negotiation. Why would anybody, Cathy, give you a deal if they think you can't walk away? That you will guarantee a bad deal if they think that you are so weak you can't walk away.
OK,
that
so
is
might
what
Article
colleagues
50,
are trying to do now, and
might
that is wrong.
Article 50 have to be suspended, though, if you're not going to take no deal off the table?
Well, let's see what happens this week. I think what the government's doing is the right thing, which is to find out what Parliament thinks is the best possible option to deliver Brexit. The instruction the British people gave us, 17.4 million
But in
people
order to do
voted
that,
for us
Article 50 might have to be
do the
suspended.
best we can to deliver Brexit. Well, no, let's see what happens this week. My favourite option was for the withdrawal agreement to go through. That didn't happen, so let's see what Parliament thinks is the right way. I think to allow the government to have all its options open is the best way to support the government.
Very briefly,
that's what I hope colleagues will do.
Very briefly, what do you think the public thinks of this caper?
I think the public, and the polling evidence is aplenty, and I used to run a polling company, as you know, YouGov. The public want us to get on with this, and I think that if they feel that Westminster has tin ears and doesn't want to listen to them and wants to either derail Brexit or somehow tell them that they're too stupid and they got it wrong and they must have another go again, and by the way, that'll be just as divisive and I think in many ways corrosive to the relationship between politicians and the nation, it would be terribly, terribly harmful.
Nadhim Zahawi, thank you very much. Let's turn now to Yvette Cooper in the studio. Isn't the reality that your bill ruling out a no deal makes Theresa May's deal much more likely, because Brexiteers are going to back an improved version of that deal over delaying Brexit? Are you content with that?
I think the most important thing is to prevent us crashing out with no deal, particularly by accident, which is what I think is a real risk now. We've only got 68 days to go. We've had a whole series of delays from the government at every stage in this process, including the latest one of not even giving us the vote until January.
But
so I think there is a real risk of that happening, and that's why I think what my bill does, and it's quite a very limited provision, it just says if this isn't sorted by the end of February, then at that point there has to be a proposal put to Parliament to give Parliament the chance to extend Article 50, just to give the government a few extra months to try and sort this out. Because if we don't, the risks to medicine supply, to manufacturing, to policing are very serious.
Let me be clear. A softer Brexit, in your view, is preferable to a second referendum, is that right?
So I think we have to try and get a deal. I think that is the responsibility that is on us, and it has to be workable. The problem with the Prime Minister's deal is I don't think it's actually a deal at all. It was just a 2-year stopgap with no actual idea what kind of Brexit that we were going to end up with. It was like being asked people to vote blind, to walk out the door without having any idea where you're going to sleep tonight.
But if you can't get a deal, your party wants a second referendum.
So we, I think, rightly have the position that you can't rule anything off the table because we don't know what sort of deadlock that we're going to face. But I think this is really a responsibility on the Prime Minister now. She has to come forward with Plan B tomorrow. She really needs, I think, to come forward and rule out no deal herself. That would be the responsible thing to do rather than put all of this pressure.
Zahawi, that takes your negotiating cards off the table.
See, I just don't agree with that. Europe knows that no deal will hit us much harder than it will hit them. And all we're actually doing is forcing our public services, our NHS, our police, our businesses to spend billions of pounds trying to prepare for something that would be so damaging that it would put tariffs up, put food prices up in shops, and end up also taking away the crucial powers that the police use every day of the week. We shouldn't be making the country less safe. And that's why all I'm calling for is to have this sensible, steady measure to say, look, we should just be able to rule out no deal. And if it's not all sorted by the end of February, it may be that the government just needs more time.
But you yourself are not ruling out a second referendum, which is strange because January 2017, you said, I don't see how I could go out there and say it's so important to stand up for democratic votes and then say, but there's this democratic vote we just had and I'm not going to respect it now. That is exactly what you're saying now, isn't it?
No, that's right. That's why I think it's so important for us to do everything we can to try and get a deal. But look, who knows what sort of deadlock that we're facing at the moment. So, that's why we do not know where this is going to end up. But it is a responsibility on all of us, and particularly the government that has failed to consult, failed to try and build a consensus, failed to try and get agreement and run down the clock to provide a sensible way forward now.